Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martirano, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while. Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to the Behavioral Corner. My name is Steve Martirano. I hope you are familiar with this a little bit. We've been around here for a while, hanging on the corner, because it's our belief that if you stay in one place long enough, everybody important and interesting will cross your path. And we're lucky, and that's what we like to think we do every week. We talk about issues that affect our behavioral health, the decisions we make, how they make us feel emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So that's really a podcast about everything. Some things are uplifting, other things are grim, but it's all intended to inform you. That's the Behavioral Corner. Tell your friends about us. Well, a new year, believe it or not, we're how about 22 years into the 21st century. It's staggering how old I am. Anyway, new year, but some ancient problems exist. If you, for instance, think that the trading in human lives, the buying and selling of human beings is something out of the dark ages, you would be sadly wrong. Human trafficking is as current a problem as anything you can imagine. Just a few weeks ago, I opened my iPad to see a headline that said the federal government had busted a modern-day slavery ring. This was in Georgia. Horrible conditions of forced labor and sex trafficking. That's as current as can be. This problem is going on right now, and while we're going to be focusing in basically the Palm Beach area and the work being done there to fight this scourge, my guess is that wherever you're listening, there's some evidence of this, certainly some impact of human trafficking going on not far from where you are. So it's a tough topic, but we need to know more about it. So we're delighted to have our guest, a couple of experts who have dedicated their lives to doing something about this horrible situation. Our guests are Char Talmadge and Becky Dymond. As I said, they have been working for a very long time, focusing on specifically domestic sex trafficking. So we welcome both those ladies with us. Char is with the Rescue Upstream, and I'm going to get all this right, and Sharing One Love, Palm Beach County. She's the executive director, and her colleague, Becky Dymond, is with Lighthouse of Palm Beach County. And again, as I said, they're fighting the specific area in human trafficking that involves the sex trade. Ladies, thanks for joining us on the corner. Did I get all that right?
Yes.
Great. Tell us just very briefly about the organizations you are with, and so we can set this up and find out what work's being done. Char, tell us about your organization.
Oh, sure. Thanks so much for having us today. As you mentioned, this is a dark issue, but there's an opportunity for everyone listening to make a difference. And our heart is that you walk away from this discussion and you're prompted to make that decision. So I represent Rescue Upstream and Sharing One Love Palm Beach County. I'll start with Rescue Upstream. We launched in 2013 as a ministry of Journey Church here in Palm Beach County. And our in 2020 became an independent nonprofit. The primary areas of focus we have are sexual abuse prevention, and we provide that training in English and in Spanish, both virtually and in person. And we'll talk about why that's important a little bit later. And then also in outreach. So we are working directly with the Palm Beach Human Trafficking Task Force. We do several areas of outreach directly to those girls, both working on the streets as well as the many more that are being sold on the internet. In 2019, just before the pandemic, we began the formulation of a Sharing One Love Palm Beach County. And this is essentially a collaborative of very diverse organizations coming together to look at the local problem, determine what piece of the puzzle they own and what pieces of the puzzles are still missing. and with the end intent of creating a solution that can engage the community to address the issue. So hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, no, that does. Becky, tell us about Lighthouse.
We provide mental health counseling, trauma therapy, life and job skill training in the form of an outreach program where we can build relationships with gals on the street and then invite them to a job opportunity where they can be paid cash at the end of the day, just to build relationships. And we also run what's called a John School for Palm Beach County. If you get arrested for in Palm Beach County, if you get arrested for prostitution, which is for both buying and selling, you can participate in a diversion program if you haven't been arrested 3 times already. But you can participate in a diversion program that will erase those charges from your record. And so for the men, we're looking at addressing the social issues that drive the mentality that I can buy sex like a hamburger. And we're looking at the mental health issues that deal with addictions and sex addictions in particular. And then for the women, we're looking at trauma. Most everyone who's been sex trafficked, for most of them, it's just one of the latest of a whole lifelong experience of trauma. And for most of them, it's not even the worst. So we're looking at early childhood trauma. We're looking at self-worth issues and helping them at least become aware of the opportunities and the support that's out there to help them start over again. And we're working towards reopening a safe house.
Yeah, that John School, I'd love to talk at length about that. That's an interesting. I've never heard of a program quite like that. Anyway, terrific. So you guys are you don't just talk about this problem. You're out there trying to do something about it. When we say human trafficking, it's a big word. I think most of us don't really know exactly what we're talking about it. What is the definition legally of sex trafficking or human trafficking? Yeah, either one of those. Char, you want to take a shot?
I think, Becky, I think you've outlined some great details on that.
Okay, so human trafficking is where you are, people are being coerced to do either sex or labor trafficking. It's unlawful. Obviously, it involves transportation, but not necessarily across international borders. Smuggling gets people across the border. Trafficking is where they get across the border and they're not free to do what, to live their lives, to go and do whatever they want to do. And so people often get those two things confused. The smuggling, human trafficking in terms of smuggling people across international borders versus trafficking where your work is benefiting someone else, whether that's sex or labor trafficking.
And how big a problem is this?
Wow, yeah, that's a great question, and I think Becky and I would both agree a great precursor to this whole discussion is this is hard to get your arms around. I think the fair statement that most organizations in this fight will say that less than 1% get rescued. So what does that mean? That means we're basing a lot of our data on the 1% and extrapolating that to a bigger picture. So we're going to quote some statistics, some numbers. We feel there are reputable entities out there tracking this, but know that it's just the tip of the iceberg. So ILO, which is the International Labor Organization, very well-known entity, estimates up to 40 million people are in modern day slavery. So when you look at that from a revenue perspective, that really translates, because it is about profit. It's about a lot of things, but it's about money. So the money side of it looks at $150 billion a year. And
that's enforced labor.
That's in human trafficking. So
yeah.
That's in the force, fraud, or coercion of those that are performing services in labor and or sex. Also includes a segment of organ trafficking too, which we will really not talk about today. But yeah, that's the overarching figure that is pretty consistently shared out there. And then when you look at that and you break it down, well, what does that mean on a daily basis? The math takes us to a number of over $400 million a day. So it is a moneymaker. It is an absolute moneymaker. And again, that's really a global picture. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Polaris Project, because we're going to spend a lot of time talking about domestic trafficking and then very specifically domestic sex trafficking. So Polaris Project is an organization that runs the National Human Trafficking Hotline number. So I'm going to do a little promo for them right now. So anybody that's listening to this, if you have your phone or a pen handy, I'm going to ask you to write a number down, because the number one way individuals are rescued is because somebody reports. And so that number is 1-888-3737-888. And that again is the National Human Trafficking Hotline number run by Polaris. So that's a highly promoted number, and that's the conduit for the data that you're going to be hearing as we talk about the United States. So
yeah, you keep returning to this issue of the difficulty in identifying the people who need the help, because after all, they're not in the best position to go looking for help. So this self-reporting is absolutely critical, right? Getting people to first understand that there are people out there that actually want to help you. Do you think, let me ask both of you, do you think that some of the difficulty in reaching the population, particularly the women who are in the sex trade, is that they feel if they were to reach out for help, they might wind up either being deported or going to jail? There would be some negative consequence in trying to escape that. Is that a problem?
I would say yes. For one, the traffickers are master manipulators. And so I'm sure you've heard the term blame shift, right? My dog ate my homework, right?
Mm-hmm.
Traffickers shame shift so that the woman, this is who you are, this is all you're good for, this is your life, nobody else wants you, nobody else cares. I care for you, like, oh, that's a weird way to care. And so very often it's us against them, and the whole dynamics of trauma bonding make it very difficult for a woman to break away.
Right.
Most of the women that are being sex trafficked in the United States are American. It's not.
They are.
Yeah, American men have an appetite for American women. So there are international, there are definitely people trafficked internationally that come in, bait and switch. You're going to clean hotel rooms and end up, doing sex trafficking, being sex trafficked. But primarily it's Americans.
Let me ask you about the outreach. It's a shame to use that kind of sanitized phrase for what these people do. But where do they place those ads that wind up being phony? In newspapers, online? How are women who are being tricked into this hearing about this opportunity? Are they in newspaper ads or?
No. Interesting question. There's been a real shift. Again, Polaris did some analysis on pre-pandemic stay-at-home mandates compared to post, and they saw a definitive shift in reporting to online. So web-based online actually increased 30% over reporting from the street. So we know a lot of the activity, the majority of the activity is online. And there are websites, we track several of them here in Palm Beach County, where we actually scrape the advertised numbers and create a CVS file that we can then text to them to get them help. So and prior to that, we would actually go onto the websites. There's all kinds of websites. Some of them are modeled under escort services. But anyways, you are able to locate the girls there. They're not using their real name, but there's always a phone number, and that phone number is our entryway point.
But Steve, were you asking about how women get trapped into the life?
No. I mean, what's the first point of contact? Content. I mean, it sounds like they're looking for jobs, they're looking for work, and they see an ad saying, we're looking for maids or something. I was wondering how they
Oh,
found that.
Well,
How.
internationally, there's actually recruiters, and the recruiters will go to, typically poor countries where there's, high unemployment and, no opportunities, and they'll say, hey, we can get you to the United States, we'll get you a great job, and then they ship the women over, which really makes it difficult for the women that are trafficked internationally because the recruiter is still in their home village, right? And very
Yeah,
often cultures are such that if they knew that their daughter or their neighbor or their friend was being sex trafficked, they would have nothing to do with her. Plus, if she reports, there's always, that threat, I will burn your family's house down if you report, if you say anything.
sure,
So they
sure.
are double bind all over. For American women, there's a number of ways that people get trapped into it. There's guerrilla pimping, where they grab somebody off the street and force them into that, which happens a lot to runaways. Especially vulnerable sectors of our culture that are like transgender and people that are kind of on the outside because they already feel you know excluded. They already feel like they don't have options. And then there's the Romeo situation where a guy's going, I love you, I you're the most beautiful woman, we're going to live together forever, oh, we're just in this really tight place, and hey, if you could do this, we could save money and we'll go buy a farm in Montana or whatever, the whole baloney.
Hmm.
That's probably the most common way. Another way though is for gals that are already working like in strip clubs. Um, the 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 traffickers, I don't want to call them pimps because that's kind of a compliment in some, you
yep.
know, parts of our culture. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
call them,
Makes it sound like a skill,
yeah,
a
yeah,
certain trade.
Yeah.
right,
Uh,
right. And so
well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
the traffickers will go to where there's already, gals are already in the sex industry and go fishing. They're like, oh, aren't you worried about coming out at night and you've got $8,000 cash? Well, I could meet you and I could escort you to your. It's a mess.
I had at your suggestion, wanted to ask you about, who's vulnerable to this kind of situation, the women who are vulnerable. But I think some of that's so painfully obvious. Certainly, poverty is a big factor, um, and maybe education levels. I don't know. But it seems to me what you're describing are people who have been one way or another thrown away. They are just sort of the refuge of society. No one seems to care about them. Why else would you turn to people who are going to exploit you sexually unless you had absolutely no other opportunities? Is that pretty much the case with a lot of these people?
Actually,
No.
I've worked with gals that have college degrees.
Mhm.
One gal, when I first started, I didn't work with this gal, but I read an article, and she was a college grad, single mom, and car blew up. And this guy loaned her money to fix the car. Seemed like a good deal. And then she couldn't pay it back fast enough, so he said, "Well, I'll watch your son, and you go out and turn tricks so you can pay me back. And if you mess up, I'll take your son out." And she was so terrified
Mm.
that the police would botch it and put her son at risk, that she was trafficked for about 6 months before she finally said, all right, this is just not working. And she was able to get out with her son intact and everything was good. But it's like people that, things that happen where you go, I that was just the craziest thing. You never expect
Mhm.
somebody to
You,
loan.
you couldn't you
Yeah,
couldn't imagine. You
yeah,
could while it's easy to imagine a financial
right.
hardship, it's hard to imagine that it could be solved by that means where your child is being held a hostage. So thanks for dispelling that myth of mine. But let me ask you while we're on the topic, Char, for instance, what do most of us get wrong about the women who are in the sex business? There
Yeah.
are probably myths about who they are and what they do. What are some of the biggest you've encountered?
Yeah, and I think there's a whole lot of myths that need to be dispelled. It's even at a 20,000 foot level when we look at some of the bad messaging that's been out there on human trafficking, that children are being sold on Wayfair, for example. There's been organizations that have promoted a lot of misinformation. And so what's really important about this for your listeners is that they really understand what this is, because the issue that bubbled up and going into the pandemic with all this bad marketing on human trafficking and kids being stolen out of grocery carts and all of these things really clogged up the service system, those that are trying to help real victims. So it's really important then you understand the issue so that when you're reporting, it's based on fact. So that's just a sidebar comment. And it's, people have seen the movie Liam Nelson's Taken, right?
Hey, one, 2, and 3. He's the unluckiest man in the world.
Yeah, and so can that happen? Yeah, that can happen, but that is not the normal way it happens. Like Becky was saying, like if I look at data, which I have right in front of me for US 2019, #1 recruitment tactic, intimate partner relationship. That's the Romeo she was just talking about. Job offer, false promises, and familial trafficking, which is the trafficking of somebody by somebody in your family that you know, which again, what's the root cause of that? Likely substance abuse. So we haven't talked about substance abuse yet, but substance abuse plays a huge role along with prior sexual abuse. So again, to answer your question, this misnomer we need to dispel is really about, it's not a choice. So people view prostitution as a choice, and in most cases is simply the exploitation of a vulnerability. And what I like to share with individuals when we're doing an outside event is ask 3 10-year-old girls, what do they want to be when they grow up? Does anyone say they want to be a prostitute? No, it's not a career path choice, right? It is the exploitation of the vulnerability. So then you got to peel back the onion and get to the vulnerabilities, which we're talking about.
Yeah, and the problem is exacerbated and made much more difficult when the perception is often warped by the media. Becky, you just reminded me of the story of the young girl with the college. Of course, she was in a different situation, but Hollywood loves the story of the beautiful young girl who's going to law school. She just blithely decides, I'm going to be an escort and be $1,000 a night so I can pay my way through law school. I mean, that's Pretty Woman, right? Wasn't that pretty much the plot of Pretty Woman? It's nonsense. It's complete nonsense. And the other thing, and Char, I want to just on this, when you talk about clogging up the lines of communication to get help, we live in the golden age of misinformation. There's a lot of information that's available and accurate, and there's a lot that's crazy. Well, people, we all know, they're snatching kids and just crazy stuff. That makes your jobs much more difficult. So the public has to be educated. I know you guys want to talk about this, about what to look for and what to be aware of so that you can maybe help some people. What are some of the things you would advise them, Becky?
Can I toss in a couple more things about the myths?
Absolutely.
90% of the women that are in the life want out. 92% are controlled by pimp, gang, mafia, and don't keep the money that they make.
So it is slavery, no matter how you slice it.
It's slavery. The odds of being murdered are 18 times higher than a 7-Eleven clerk, which is one of the most deadly jobs that are in the US. So the average life expectancy for a woman in the life is 7 years. 7 years. Because by then she's either so spun out, so traumatized, PTSD, she can't add two and two, she's either, spun out on drugs or dead, because the trafficker can't go, hey, it's been great, it's been real, you're not pretty anymore, so, have a good life. No, he's going to take her out, and they'll find her in a dumpster someplace. It's like,
It's absolutely staggering. We're not talking about stuff that occurred in the wild beginnings of the 20th century, and
right.
we're talking about right now. We're talking about right now. It's shocking. So let me ask you, how can prevention be addressed and to reduce the risk of all that? What's going on in that regard?
Go for it, Char.
Yeah, I think, I could speak to what we're doing here in South Florida. One of the things that's important is giving people the right information. So I think that it's upon us to put out on all of our social media platforms and provide trainings that really have people understand what the real facts are. So on the prevention side, we feel very strongly about sexual abuse prevention. It is the common thread of vulnerability in particularly domestic sex trafficking victims. And so being able to understand what that looks like, that it's not stranger danger, that most of the victims of sexual abuse know the abuser, is critically important. We must protect our youth. Because, and I know Becky could talk about this, many of her cases, they have said, well, they took it from me. I figured to survive, I could at least get a little bit of money, so it is the precursor of sexual abuse that plants that seed in there that allows that coercion to thrive, if you will. I think the other thing on the prevention side, or really the awareness side, is understanding that our victims here speak many languages. So how can we get them the information? So, excitingly enough, when you look at the Polaris data, in 2019, there was a 19% increase of victim reporting. That's huge. That means those of us that are in this fight are getting the information out there so that the victims themselves are receiving it, understanding it, and then reporting. So there needs to be a continued commitment to that. And we are fortunate. We have a partner we're working with who's a survivor, trafficked out of many different countries, now living in South Florida, who developed a QR code that has been translated. Those resources are now translated for the state of Florida in 10 different languages. So that means those foreign victims that we have here can scan that code, and whether they're Asian, Russian, they can find out something you brought up earlier, Steve, which is, if they're a foreign victim here under force, fraud, or coercion for sex trafficking, they're not going to get deported. They don't know that. They're told lies. But they can now read that and then understand how to get help. So it is about, like anything else, applying technology, understanding, working with survivors is critically important to create the solutions that will drive prevention.
And I think
Becky,
something,
go ahead.
I think something else that's really important is talking to youth, because a 16-year-old is not going to appreciate mom and dad breathing down their neck and telling them about these scary things that are out there, even though they're real. But if you can speak to that 16-year-old's class, right? She's got friends, or he's got friends, right? And they're going, what are you doing hanging out with a guy that's 8 years older than you? Really? Like, what good can come of that? Why would he be interested in you? Stop and think for a minute. Because right now it costs usually less than $100 to build enough of a relationship with a girl to traffic her. Right?
Yeah, it's great. It's great. You talk about sort of peer review. I mean, most kids would be able to tell their peers, well, you're doing what? That ain't cool.
Right.
And that's, by the way, that's a big motivator. If it ain't cool, maybe I shouldn't be doing it.
Well, here's a girl that would like a phone, a new phone, or a new pair of jeans or whatever, and like go get my nails done, my hair done, or whatever. And so the trafficker goes, "Oh yeah, baby, you're so beautiful. I'll do that," all the time he's grooming her. He's grooming her to take her to the next place where he can make money off of her. And she's so naive. When I was 16, I was naive. Yeah, my daughter, who has watched me do this for 11 years now, she met this guy who wanted to, wanted to meet her at a warehouse. She had a friend that it was a musician, and she was like all over it. I'm going, what are you thinking? Right?
Yeah, right. So, well, that's not that period of time among young people is not the optimal time for their judgment at that point. Is not state of the art.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of
Right.
slow down signs or
Right.
whoa signs. They just go for it.
What could go wrong?
Let me sort of get to get. It's so heartening to find out that there are groups like yours. By the way, we're talking to Char Talmadge. She's director of Rescue Upstream, and her colleague Becky Dymond with Lighthouse PVC, and they have been fighting the sex trafficking trade for a very long time. So, we hear the problem. It's vast. The difficulties are reaching the people in need. When that all goes according to plan, what are some of the things your groups need to immediately provide to them? I'm thinking of things like housing and perhaps even drug treatment. What's a few of the things that you need to get to that group of people immediately? Char, give me a couple.
Yeah, I think so. This is a big burly question you're throwing out here. There's a lot of different factors that come into play. There's a lot of different solutions that need to be bridged to carry a girl or a boy, and I just want to say there are boys and men trafficked, to restoration. So, and we all have our lanes. So I'm going to shift a little bit over to Sharing One Love for a minute, because at Rescue Upstream, obviously, as I mentioned, we're sexual abuse prevention and we're outreach. So our lane is to find them and build relationships with them so that they will trust them enough, so then we can pull them through, thread them through to the partner, no matter who that is. So let's go to Sharing One Love, because Sharing One Love is being developed as a platform that can be then duplicated anywhere across the United States. Really, you have essentially some stakeholders, and in Palm Beach County, that's Catholic Charities. They are the grant-funded long-term case management for victims of labor and sex trafficking. Sharing One Love, who is our technology partner, Becky with Lighthouse, who is licensed mental health counselor, counseling, and then also Rescue Upstream, obviously, for outreach. But more importantly is the community that's coming around to address those issues. So we have a large church that stepped in, Community of Hope. So they have a grocery store that the girls can go grocery shopping. They have a closet so they can get clothes. We were invited, I don't know if we say this or not, we were invited to participate in this because there's a great drug and alcohol rehab in South Florida who's also raised their hand and said, hey, we will sponsor so many free detoxes for girls coming out of the life. So that's a resource, and then there's all kinds of other organizations, and Becky, you can jump in, that are unfolding and coming in and say, we'll step into this Sharing One Love partnership to augment the government resources that are there, because it is complicated. And depending on whether they have a drug issue or not, that right there takes them down a different lane. So Becky, do you want to add?
Yeah.
Becky?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, for most women that are being sex trafficked, this is just the latest in a whole long line of trauma. And so the first thing is to build some level of trust. I can't help you if you won't let me in. And for them, their parents weren't trustworthy, most of them, if they were even present, right? And if I can't trust my own parents, why would I even think about trusting you? And so that's the beauty of this idea of creating micro businesses where I can pay them cash. They're still on the street. I'm not, resources are available if you want them, but that typically flows through relationships. And so when they see somebody who's been there for 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever, and they go, I think she's real. And then they're going, okay, so what do you have? What are the other options? Because I can get you, for gals that are ready, I can get them scholarships to develop a marketable skill. I can provide all kinds of things when they're ready, when they're clean, when when they're stable. But you're asking them to give up certain things to be
Mhm.
able to receive, right? And that happens along the line of a relationship. And so I think that's really, what Char does with Rescue Upstream, making the phone calls, what we're trying to do in drawing in grassroots people in the areas, that will support, participate, refer gals. Hey, have you met this gal? Char and I went and handed out some goodie bags for Christmas, and like, in that group of people, we're going to be known as the red bag ladies. That they care. They're invested in us. Don't know why, don't get it, don't understand it, but hey, it's free stuff. And so,
Yeah, exactly. That sort of thing will seep through,
right,
and maybe turn the light on. It's a dark. There's no doubt. It's a dark topic. It's a tragedy, trafficking in human beings. But your message is so hopeful. I mean, there's help out there. We say this about
Mhm.
substance
Oh, yeah.
abuse people all the time. It's an isolating situation. You're alone, and you think there's no hope out there. Clearly, there are a lot of people who want to get involved and help, and these two ladies are exactly examples of that. You're hearing about this because, first of all, we should hear about stuff like this all the time. But January is, as I understand, set aside to highlight issues of human trafficking. So we thank our guests for joining us for that. You did have a local event in your area coming up, I guess, in February that you wanted to talk about. What was
Yeah,
that?
yeah, and I would like just to add one other thing. I think we're grateful and blessed to be in Palm Beach County. We have a super strong human trafficking task force here. I don't want to minimize the support that we get from our law enforcement, which was out on the streets with me last night late, handing out more of those red bags, connecting with these girls on the streets, but also Palm Beach Victim Services, who's the front end of intake when we have somebody coming out of an arrest or a situation. And then again, Catholic Charities, who's doing some of the case management. So just really grateful for that network. And again, it's about connecting the dots. I'm a faith-based organization. So is Becky. But we're working hand in hand with other NGOs, law enforcement, government, and that is where the solution starts. So the event. So Community of Hope is one of our partners. The event's February 17th. 6 p.m. in the evening. They're located on Military Trail, just south of Forest Hill, for those of you listening local. And we are going to show a local Florida documentary, the story of Florida and human trafficking. It's called Invisible. And it will be followed by a panel. Myself and Becky will be on that. We will have law enforcement, the task force will be, and we will also have a survivor on that. And most importantly, afterwards, we will have in the lobby a lot of different groups that are touching this issue, looking for volunteers. So if someone's heart's tugging right now, saying, hey, I can be part of this, I'm going to tell you, there are so many ways you can help. And even if you're a professional and you're like, I don't really have the bandwidth, but I'm a professional provider. If it's your heart to sponsor one or two a year, we have a system already built where it's a 3-step process that you can come in, register, and then when there's a need, we can connect with you. So that's our heart.
Yeah, it's great. So often most people's intentions are good. Most people want to help, and most people are sort of blocked about, well, I'm just a person, what do I do? Our guests demonstrate that you can do a lot, but you've got to, first of all, pick up a phone or talk to somebody and get involved. Important topics. Thanks so much for joining us, ladies. And obviously, thanks so much for your work. We hope we can call upon you going forward on the Behavioral Corner. It's an important topic.
thanks so much for the opportunity.
Retreat Behavioral Health has proudly been serving the community for over 10 years. Here at Retreat, we believe in the power of connection and quality care. We offer comprehensive, holistic, and compassionate treatment from industry-leading experts. Call 855-802-6600 or visit us at www.retreatbehavioralhealth.com to begin your journey today.